If you have told your friends and family that you are working on a book, then I bet you have been asked one of the most dreaded questions for all first time authors. So, when can I read it? Oh, it's so difficult because, of course, we want to share with our friends and our family that we are working on this big, big project. But at the same time, when you're doing something for the first time, you really don't know how it's going to go. So, today I want to talk about how to set up a realistic timeline that will not only allow you to answer your friends and family's questions about when you're going to be done, but that will also allow you to be really honest with yourself, to adjust your work habits and your work schedule as you need to hit your goals, and to really just feel much, much more confident that you know what you're doing. Stay tuned. If you are fed up with trying to stumble through this writing project with no idea where you're going or when you'll get there, you need a plan. And I have got the tool for you. Right now, you can download the Writing Plan Calculator. It's going to give you a timeline for your whole book project, the goals that you need to hit along the way, and the flexibility to adjust when your schedule changes. You can download it right now at pageandpodium.com/plan. So tell me if this sounds familiar. You are working on your book, you're really trying to, think about what you want to say. Maybe you're journaling a little bit if you've been watching this channel probably. You are probably trying everything you can to make progress on that book, and you still feel like you're getting nowhere. Sometimes this takes the form of people just kind of writing random chapters and hoping that they'll come into place. If it's a memoir, you might be writing kind of different scenes, different stories, and just hoping for the best. Sometimes this comes in the form of endless research. This is particularly true, by the way, if you are writing a book that is based on your expertise. I see this a lot with academics where you're having to do the research. So we can just research and research and research and never start writing. And it also can take the form of just putting off your book, that you know you need to work on it. And that pressure just feels so overwhelming that we kind of go into that flight response or that freeze response, whichever tracks for you, where we really just don't get any work done. We put so much pressure on ourselves that all we can do is just try to escape, try to get out of there. And one thing that you probably know if you've been watching this channel is that I believe the biggest thing that's going to derail you from that first book project is just not having a plan. So many first time authors, this is fiction and nonfiction, by the way, will try to just jump in, see how it goes. They hope that they can adjust. They hope they can kind of figure it out. They Google things here and there. And the process just begins to feel so slow, so discouraging. And this is why we need a plan, right? Because a plan will help us structure out those smaller steps that we need to hit to make sure that we get to that bigger goal of finishing that draft in a reasonable amount of time and without feeling so totally burned out and exhausted that we never want to look at the thing again. By the way, that happens more than you think. So I wanted to make this video today because I hear a lot of first-time authors say, how long is this going to take? Or, oh my gosh, is it really going to take, 9 months? Or I think I can, knock it out in a couple of months if I just really put my mind to it. All of these different kind of confusion statements and frankly defense mechanisms where we're really just kind of trying to fake it till we make it. That's silly. That's silly. There are plenty of people who have gone before you who can tell you how to do this, and I want to be one of those. So let's talk about why these kind of stalling tactics come up and what they do to us. And then I'm going to go through a tool that I have just created for you that you can download for free that's going to help you put together what your weekly action plan is. But okay, so first I want to talk a little bit about what we are doing to ourselves when we refuse to set a plan, when we say, you know what, I'm just going to figure it out as I go. So there's a few things here. And the first thing that I see the most often is that because the progress is so slow, people really start to doubt whether they're even capable of writing this book at all. And you've probably heard me I talk about this a lot, how self-doubt really for the writer, for an aspiring writer especially, self-doubt is that's going to knock you off track every single time. Because really when we are writing, we are connecting our mind with this communicative act, right? We're connecting our mind with others. When we have self-doubt, we are fully in our mind, right? And I bet you've experienced this either in writing and or in other areas of your life, that the further you get in your own head, the harder it is to get out, right? And so the longer we tell ourselves, oh my gosh, am I so slow? Like, do I not know what I'm doing? Why isn't this coming together? Really, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy that the more we tell ourselves we don't know what we're doing, we don't have a plan, we don't know how to make a plan, the more that becomes actually true for us because we're so stuck in our head. We really cannot see how we're going to get out and get our ideas onto the page. The second thing that happens is sort of the opposite. So either you're somebody that kind of gets in your own head, or I also see a lot of people, especially if you're a high achiever, especially if you're somebody who gets really frustrated when you can't figure things out, because usually you always can. So what is happening with this one thing is the opposite of that self-doubt, the opposite of slowing down, stopping yourself, discouraging yourself. And that is what I would call magical thinking. So I see this a lot with people who are interested in doing writing retreats. And I used to do a lot of writing retreats. I used to run a writing group. So I talked to a lot of people like this. And one of the things that I would hear pretty often is, you know what, I think if I just put my mind to it, I bet I can write, like, maybe not the whole book, but I bet I can write like 50 or 60 pages in the weekend, like 70 pages, 80 pages, right? Like the number goes up. I get that because I will tell you, I'll be a little bit vulnerable. When I was working on my third book, I was also really kind of escalating in this business. I was moving. There was a lot of stuff that was going on in my kind of my personal life. And I really started to get in that kind of frustration rabbit hole where I was really like, I have written books before. I've written many books before at that point, right? Why can't I get this on the page? And I do think I started to beat myself up a little bit, but really I am a person that's going to go in the magical thinking. I am a person who was like, you know what? I need like a 4-day retreat away in a cabin. I'm going to just like lock myself in. I'm just going to write the whole time. Okay, so if you have not done a writing retreat, and by the way, I should have known better. I have done many, many writing retreats in my life. But if you have not done a writing retreat, let me just kind of tell you how this will go. The first day, and especially if you do your prep work before, which is super important that you're kind of all prepped out, you're ready to just write. The first day, you can knock out a lot. So, I mean, I really would not think that it is unusual, at least, for me, to have gotten maybe 25 pages on the first day, especially again, if I had done a lot of prep work, I knew exactly what I wanted to write. It was something that I knew, a topic I knew really well. When you wake up on that second day, you do not feel that kind of excited energy, that really enthusiasm, because you are tired. Our brains really are not made to just think and produce just constantly for, 8, 10, 12 hours and then sleep for a little bit and then do it again. Our brains need rest. And even though, we're knocking it out, we're in knock it out mode, writing is creative, of course. We are calling on our brains to do something that is challenging, but also it's inventive, right? And that is not something that we are doing constantly in our day-to-day life. It is a muscle. So that is something that your brain is going to get really tired. It's going to need to rest. So I always plan in a writing retreat, if I'm going to get 20, 25 pages the first day, that's fine, but it's probably going to be more like 10 or 12 the second. Like if we're being honest, and that is going to be diminishing returns all the way through your retreat. And in fact, I really don't believe in a writing retreat that's more than a couple of days, just because you're going to start to get slow. You're going to start to get frustrated. You're going to start to doubt yourself. We're going to head all the way back over into that other direction of not having a plan. So, this is all to say, thinking that you're going to knock things out in, just one retreat or just lock yourself in your office for the weekend, it's just probably not going to happen. So if I can just be totally honest with you about this, I have never seen anybody write a book in a writing retreat, the whole thing or even half. Really, writing is an incremental project. And that's good because as you do it, you are flexing that brain muscle and you are building up that brain muscle and you're building up your confidence. So we're kind of tackling both of these issues, this issue of this self-doubt and frustration and this issue of this magical thinking that really comes from not having a plan. So, how is a plan actually going to help you here? Because of course you still have to execute on it, right? A plan is also not magical. The biggest thing I want to tell you is that if you have a plan, if you have figured out kind of, okay, I need to do this many chapters per week, I'm going to write on these days at these times, and it's going to take me this total amount of time. If you have that, then you have a concrete, objective measurement that you have set for yourself. Now, remember, I said this earlier, and I believe this. When it is your first book, you really are going to be kind of still guessing anyway, right? But what happens with the self doubt and the magical thinking is that, yeah, we're guessing, sure, but we're also not writing it down. We're guessing and we're just kind of keeping it in our head, right? So what happens is when things are going slower than we think that they should, we'll also tend to dial up that plan that we had so that the gap is even bigger. So that not only are we behind where we wanted to be, we're like more behind than we even thought we would be. That is how we get to that doubt and that frustration, is that we just see that gap getting bigger and bigger. When you actually take the time to plot out what you're going to be working on and when and how long you have, then you can measure that. So for each of these problems, that's going to do a different thing for you. And remember, those often go together. The first thing is you can remind yourself, especially if you are kind of an overachiever or a high achiever, you can remind yourself, hold on, let me look at what my plan was. How far am I really behind? Because what I find is you're not usually as behind as you think you are, right? Usually the amount that you are behind is going to be kind of marginal, right? And often we can catch up. Often there are ways to kind of build in some breaks, build in some extra time, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, by the way, so that it's fine. If you miss a writing, you miss a week because your kid's sick or you miss a week because you're on vacation with your family, it's fine. You can make that back up. And when you have written down your plan, you also know that you intended to do that all along, right? So it's like if you have ever been somebody, that has gone on a diet. Do you ever hear about this, having these cheat days? It's really beneficial, right? Because actually when we plan in those breaks from our diet, it gives our body a chance to really like rejuvenate, kind of get your metabolism revved back up. But you know what happens when you're on a diet and you don't plan those cheat days? Is that you're going to fall off the wagon at some point, right? You're going to have two big pieces of chocolate cake, delicious, and then so many people will get in their head about that, right? So they'll either default to that self-doubt, what is the point of this? Why am I even doing it? I'm a failure, and just abandon the whole thing altogether. Or they go to the magical thinking thing where they're like, well, I'm going to just be on the treadmill for 2 hours, I guess. And neither of those work with dieting. Neither of them work with writing. But what does work is putting a line in the sand, making a plan, and then objectively measuring yourself against it and adjusting. So, shoot, you know what? I was supposed to get a chapter done this week and I didn't. What is that going to do to my plan? Oh, it turns out it just pushes it back a week. It's not that big of a deal, right? So we can overcome that, but if we don't have it written down, we'll tend to kind of make the delay a lot bigger in our head. Of course, the other side of this, and I think everyone experiences both, by the way, is that sometimes we will tend to go the opposite way, where we will tend to be very, very permissive with ourselves. Now, I have a client who talks about nutrition. She's a nutrition coach. And one of the things that she talks about in terms of this dieting framework, I do think works really well. But she talks about how a lot of times people will use the term kind of moderation. They'll use that in a way that is really actually hurting their own goals, because they'll say like, oh, I'm going to eat candy in moderation, or I'm going to drink soda in moderation. But again, moderation is not a plan. Moderation is really up to interpretation, right? So sometimes what she sees is that people will end up becoming more and more and more permissive with themselves. And then they start to wonder, why am I not, having the results that I want? Why am I not feeling better? Well, it's because you did not put a line in the sand and then hold yourself accountable and make adjustments as needed. The same is true in writing. So I see this all the time. Oh, I just didn't get my writing time in today, because there was a thing at work and I was up late and then I was tired and I needed to watch TV. Or, I didn't get this done because I kind of have this other goal. My kid's in baseball. I have to be at the baseball games. All those are legitimate reasons to take a break from writing. The problem is that when we get in the habit of kind of giving ourselves these excuses, and when we have not decided what we want to do to hit our goal, all that permissiveness, it's very easy to make excuses for ourselves, right? Why we're not making progress. The problem again is that what that is going to inevitably lead to is either self-doubt and or magical thinking. When we have not written down what we want to do, we can't hold ourselves accountable to it. We can't have other people hold us accountable to it, right? So, whichever way you're going to tend to swing, whether it's going to be more permissiveness or whether it's going to be kind of self doubt and really believing you're a failure when actually you're doing fine, or some combination of both of those, a concrete plan is really going to help you to stay the course and to be kind and encouraging to yourself, to allow yourself to adjust because you're not just flying blind. You are making conscious decisions about how you want to move forward and what you need to do to hit the goals that you want to hit. So, we've got to have a plan. Of course, there's other benefits too, by the way. You're going to be able to tell your agent or your publisher when you're going to get done. You're going to be able to budget for your book coach, etc. But I really want to think about mindset here. And I've been thinking a lot about this. And so, one of the things that I wanted to do was put together a new download for y'all so that you can pull this. It's a calculator. You can pull this calculator. You can use it to figure out what your kind of goal milestones are. And you can do exactly what I've been talking about. You can really think concretely and objectively about where you want to be, and what kinds of adjustments you're willing to make, and how much you want to hold yourself accountable versus how permissive do you want to be with yourself. It's just going to give you a lot more control. And I will tell you, anytime you're doing something that is new, that feeling of being out of control, of not knowing kind of what's coming, that's a really kind of a pernicious feeling. So the more we can put that control back in your hands, the better. So I want to walk you through this calculator so that you can kind of see how it works, because I think also making a plan feels kind of intimidating, and this is not intimidating at all. Okay, so here is our calculator. You can download your own copy by going to pageandpodium.com/plan. And this is going to make a copy of this document in your own Google Drive so that you will be able to reference it. Like I've said, adjust it because you probably will need to adjust it, and figure out on your own how you want to move forward with your writing plan. So this is very easy to use, but I just want to kind of talk you through the components that I'm going to ask you to do as you're making this plan. You can work along with me if you'd like, or you can pull this up later. So the first thing is really any solid writing plan is going to start with you committing to when you're going to write. The problem I see all the time is that people kind of think that they'll just be inspired, and then when they're inspired, then they'll sit down to write. But if you've been trying to do this, you know that's not how it goes. Something else will always come up, and writing is hard. So it's really difficult to choose that, especially as you kind of get going on your book over, watching TV or playing with your kids or whatever it might be. So the first thing we want to do is really commit to when you're going to write. Now, I kind of started this out here. I gave you a little example. So maybe this person is going to work from 7 in the morning until 8:30. Maybe that works for them with their work schedule. This probably is not a person that has children. But if you have to go to work at 9, maybe you can, get ready early, work till 8:30, head to work at 9. So you want to put in here, so on Monday, let's say we're going to do that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right? Now, the next thing you're going to need to do is put in the actual number of hours that this is going to be. So we're saying about an hour and a half on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And let's just copy this into Friday as well. Now, we have time on the weekends probably, right? So you could add more, but I want you to be kind of cautious with yourself because remember what I was saying about writing retreats, how we can really burn ourselves out. Our brain needs to rest. So I really want to caution you against, every single day I'm going to write for 3 hours, or even frankly, I know a lot of people kind of float around the internet telling you to write every day. That doesn't work for a lot of people. So I really want you to kind of be in tune with your body and your brain and really listen to what is going to be realistic for you. It is much, much better to do a little at a time for a slightly longer period of time than it is to plan to knock everything out in a month and a half and then you're just frustrated and you quit, right? So we're going to be a little cautious here, but I think 4.5 hours a week, 5 hours a week, that really is doable if you're really dedicated to it. You might need a little bit less than that, but I would not go up to like 8 or 10, frankly. That is going to be, you are very likely to get burned out at that pace. So let's go with 4.5 now. I think that's pretty reasonable. Now, for this, your book section, you're going to be filling in here some different kind of specifics about your book. So I do want to mention you can use this for fiction as well, but these book lengths are with nonfiction in mind. So a medium book length for nonfiction, about 200 pages. If you really want your book to be longer, or if you're writing fiction, you're going to want to bump up a little bit higher. So a lot of fiction, we might want to go to very long or especially long. But let's say we're going to do just a nonfiction. This is, by the way, I put 200 pages double spaced, but this is about 60,000 words. This is a really standard length for your first draft for a nonfiction book. If you'd like, you can put in the number of chapters. I do recommend that you do this. You might not be totally sure yet, but let's say, for the average memoir, I typically recommend kind of guesstimating about 20 chapters. You may, have slightly fewer, you may have slightly more, but let's say that we're going to do about, let's say 23 chapters. Just make it an odd number because it is a calculator, right? So I don't want it to be so easy to do in your mind. And then you want to talk about your average writing pace. Again, this is going to vary not only on you and your style, but also will vary whether you're doing fiction or nonfiction. So academic nonfiction, that's going to take you way, way longer per page than just like a kind of a standard fiction. And particularly, if you're doing a lot of kind of world building, that can actually go really quickly. So you'll just have to kind of know yourself. And again, be open to evaluating how it's going and adjusting based on that feedback. So let's say, we're going to hit about 2 pages an hour. And that's going to be that's double space. So that's going to be about 600 words an hour. So that would be pretty standard, in my experience, for if you're writing a memoir, if you're writing nonfiction, that is a topic you know very well. You might be able to go faster. You can adjust and choose kind of faster or slower. I did not put anything higher than 4 pages an hour because you are unlikely to be writing more than 4 pages an hour for any extended period of time. But let's just go with 2. That's about what I can do on a regular basis. And then here is where I really wanted to add this little extra boost to just give yourself permission to take some weeks off. Remember what I was saying about those kind of cheat days or those cheat weeks when you're dieting? They seem like they're derailing you, but when you plan on them, they can actually really boost your progress because they give your muscles time to heal, and your brain needs that too, right? You are going to need some time away, and if you don't take time away, often our bodies make us anyway, right? So let's plan for it, and then that way it won't feel like it's part of this failure situation. So let's say that, in the next, few months, I'm going to take 3 weeks off. You can kind of play with this as you look at the calculator down here and kind of see, but here's what we end up with in this schedule. So if we're going to write about 2 pages an hour and we're writing about an hour and a half, 3 days a week, we know then that including those scheduled times off, our project is going to take us about 25 weeks. So that's going to be about 6 months. I got to tell you, that's a pretty standard amount of time that I see a first draft take. Now, if you're like, you know what, I like a round number, then you can cut this down to 2. And now you can see you've got 24 weeks, you've got right on 6 months. Or if you feel like, you know what, actually 6 months, I am going to need more time away from that. Maybe we want to go up to 5 here. You can adjust and kind of look at what's going to work for you. But I also find, particularly if you can find the number of chapters from doing an outline, I recommend an outline, but if you're doing a different kind of way of mapping this out, how many chapters do you think you're going to have? Because it's really helpful to know. In this case, we need to hit about a chapter a week. Now, some weeks we might kind of get ahead on the next one. Some weeks maybe we knock out two, depending on, maybe the intro is a little bit shorter. But we know if we are not hitting about a chapter a week, that we are not on track with this plan. And that is where the magic comes in, because now you have so much data, right? Not only can you take this writing plan, your weekly writing schedule, put that into your calendar, mark it as busy, especially if you're somebody who, you work in a job where people can just book in with you through your Calendly or whatever. You need to block this time off, because otherwise people are going to bug you. You're going to have your kids, they're going to need stuff. You need to block this time off. It's an appointment with yourself. So put this in your calendar. And then the other thing you can put in your calendar, or sometimes people like to have a paper calendar kind of in their office, however you want to do this, which chapter are you working on which week? Where are you taking those weeks off? So maybe I'm going to do chapters 1, 2, 3, then I'm going to take a week off, then 4, 5, 6, etc. Put that in your calendar. Remember, what we are doing here is giving ourselves an objective measure of how we're doing. We're not going to beat ourselves up. We're not going to imagine we're further behind than we think. And we're also not going to tell ourselves, well, I'll just make it up later. We are going to have this objective plan written down that then, if you feel yourself slipping from that, you can add an extra week in here. You can add 2 if you want to. You can adjust and say, you know what, this is going way slower than I want. I'm going to add a Saturday morning writing time too. And what you will see is that now we start to have different types of things happening on our planner so that we can make the adjustments we need to feel really good about our progress. Okay, so I hope that this planner is going to be so valuable to you as you're working through what a realistic timeline is really going to look like for this book. Remember, you can download this, pageandpodium.com/plan, and I would really love some feedback from you, frankly. This is the newest free download that we are offering, and I really believe it's going to be a game changer for so many people, but let me know how you're using it. Send me an email. Tell me how it is helpful for you to kind of do this plan, what kinds of things you add on. Are you putting it in your online calendar? Are you putting it on a paper calendar? But I really want to hear how your writing progress is going. I know particularly when we get into these summer months, it can be really, really difficult to stay on track. And I really want to help you do that. I know there's so much going on in your life, but this book is important. Remember why you set out to write it and stay on track. Keep at it. I know you can do it. Happy writing. If you're writing your first book, I bet you already know you need a plan. But the hardest thing about making a plan for your first book is you don't have the experience to know how to plan. And that is why I put together our newest free download, the Writing Plan Calculator. With this calculator, you are easily going to be able to figure out a realistic timeline, realistic weekly goals, and the flexibility you're going to need for this long-term project. You can download it now at pageandpodium.com/plan, and you are going to knock this book out of the park. I can't wait to read it.